Over roughly 4 centuries, more than 12 million Africans were captured, chained, and shipped across the Atlantic Ocean. Most of the ones who survived the crossing were sent to grow a single crop. Not cotton, not tobacco, but sugar. The sweetness an ordinary person now stirs into their coffee without a thought was once paid for in an almost unimaginable amount of human suffering. There is no honest way to tell the story of sugar without sitting with that. But how did something so sweet end up costing so much? To understand how that happened, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. 10,000 years back, in fact, long before sugar was white, or valuable, or stained with any of this. Our story starts in New Guinea, a lush tropical island wrapped in dense rainforest. Around 8,000 years before the modern era, the people living there domesticated a wild plant called sugarcane. Back then, there were no white crystals, no sugar cubes, and no sweet drinks of any kind. There was only the cane itself, a thick, fibrous stalk that you would cut, peel, and chew, sucking the sweet juice out of the fibers. For thousands of years, that was sugar. A treat you gnawed straight from the field, then spat out. Think about that for a second. For longer than all of recorded history, the single most advanced piece of sugar technology on Earth was a set of human teeth. From those Pacific islands, the cane began to travel. It moved along ancient trade routes into Southeast Asia and then westward into the Indian subcontinent. And it was in India, sometime around the year 350, that someone made a discovery that would change the world. They learned to boil the cane juice down, again and again, until it cooled and hardened into solid golden crystals. For the very first time, sweetness could be stored, carried, and traded across great distances. The Sanskrit word for these gritty little crystals was sharkara, which meant gravel or sand. Say that word slowly and you can already hear the ancestor of our modern word, sugar. News of this magical Indian substance spread fast. When the armies of Alexander the Great reached India in the 4th century before the modern era, his officers wrote home in astonishment about a reed that produced honey without any bees. To the ancient Greeks and Romans, sugar was a rare medicine, an exotic curiosity hauled in from the very edge of the known world. The people who truly unlocked sugar, though, were the Arabs. As Islamic empires expanded across the Middle East, North Africa, and into southern Spain, they carried sugarcane with them, building sophisticated plantations and refineries everywhere the climate would allow. There was even a saying in the medieval Arab world that whoever has sugar can have whatever he wants. So when European crusaders marched into the Holy Land and tasted it for the first time, they were stunned, calling it sweet salt. Knights carried it back to cold castles all across Europe, where it quickly became one of the most prized luxuries on the entire continent. For centuries in medieval Europe, sugar was so rare and so expensive that it was locked away like jewels. Kings displayed enormous sculptures carved entirely out of hardened sugar, just to show off their wealth at banquets. Doctors prescribed it as medicine for almost any ailment. Ordinary people might live their whole lives and never once taste a single grain of it. Sugar had become white gold. And then came the moment that turned a delicate luxury into a sprawling empire. In 1493, on his second voyage across the Atlantic, Christopher Columbus carried sugarcane stalks to the islands of the Caribbean. The hot, wet climate there was perfect. The cane practically exploded out of the soil. European powers suddenly realized that the one thing that had made sugar so precious, its scarcity, could be wiped out completely. They could grow it by the boatload, and they wasted no time. Within a few short decades, entire Caribbean islands were stripped of their forests and carpeted, horizon to horizon, in nothing but waving green sugarcane. But sugar is brutal to produce. Cutting cane in tropical heat and boiling the juice in massive scalding cauldrons was punishing, dangerous, deadly work that almost no one would ever choose to do. So to feed Europe's endless hunger for something sweet, the colonial powers built their entire industry on the backs of enslaved human beings. These were the 12 million people we opened this video with. Those plantations spread across the sugar colonies of Brazil and the Caribbean to islands like Barbados, Jamaica, and Saint-Domingue. The work there was so relentless and so deadly that an enslaved person's life was often measured in months, not years. While elegant dinner guests in London and Paris stirred sugar into their tea and marveled at how refined it all was, the people who actually made it were being worked to death and ocean away. The candy in the silver bowl and the chains in the ship's hold were two ends of the very same machine. Before we go on, if this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. We dig into the hidden history behind everyday things every week. Back in Europe, the obsession only kept growing. Around the very same time, 3 bitter new drinks were sweeping across the continent. Coffee had arrived from the Middle East, tea came from China, and chocolate came from the Americas. And every single one of them tasted dramatically better with a heavy spoonful of sugar stirred in. Coffee houses were opening on every corner from London to Vienna, and an entire civilization developed a sweet tooth at almost the exact moment sugar was becoming available by the ton. This is the thing that set sugar apart from cotton or tobacco. You did not wear it, and you did not smoke it once and put it down. You ate it every single day, and the more of it people tasted, the more they wanted. Demand went vertical, the plantations expanded to feed it, and the whole brutal system only locked more tightly into place. For a long time, the entire global supply of sugar depended on these tropical colonies and the brutal slave trade that powered them. Then, in the early 1800s, a much quieter revolution began in the cold farm fields of Europe. Scientists discovered that a humble root vegetable, the sugar beet, contained the exact same sweetness as tropical cane. When the British Navy blockaded continental Europe during the Napoleonic Wars, France was suddenly cut off from its Caribbean sugar entirely. So the Emperor Napoleon poured money and resources into this strange new beet sugar industry. And within just a few years, factories across Europe were churning out sugar from beets grown in ordinary local farmland. This was the turning point. Sweetness no longer had to sail in from distant tropical islands. Combined with the roaring machinery of the Industrial Revolution, sugar production skyrocketed and prices collapsed almost overnight. A substance that kings had once locked away in guarded vaults became something an ordinary factory worker could stir into a cup of tea without thinking twice. In the span of just a few generations, the rarest treasure in Europe had become one of the cheapest things in the entire grocery store. And it never slowed down. By the 20th century, sugar had quietly worked its way into nearly everything we eat. It hides in your bread, in your sauces, in your cereal, in your salad dressing, and in foods you would never in a million years think of as sweet. The average person alive today eats more sugar in a single week than a medieval peasant might have tasted in an entire lifetime. We went from chewing a wild reed on a Pacific island to living in a world where sweetness is so cheap and so constant that we barely even notice it is there. So the next time you tear open a little paper packet of sugar and pour it into your coffee, pause on it for just a second. Those few white grains are the final step of a journey that lasted 10,000 years. They started as a wild grass on an island in the South Pacific. They passed through the hands of Indian chemists, Arab traders, and crusading knights. They built staggering fortunes, broke naval blockades, and got tangled up in one of the greatest crimes humanity has ever committed. An entire chapter of our world hidden inside something we rip open and throw away without a single thought. If you enjoyed uncovering the story behind the sweetness, subscribe and stick around. There is a hidden, often staggering history buried inside almost everything around you, waiting for someone to finally ask the question,